Since yesterday when Lilith showed everybody Herman Prime's kit and all of his skills and the really unique stuff that he brings to the game, a lot of players have been questioning, is he a strong commander? And because of how unique his kit is and how different it is, a lot of players are confused as to which pairings work well with Herman. Is Tomyris going to be a meta pairing, or is she a trash pairing, or is Boudica a good pairing, or is Liang a good pairing, or is even Cyrus a good pairing? So in today's video, we're going to find this out, as I have run like 20 or so Herman Prime testing results with 3 main marches: Boudica Prime, Zhuge, and Tomyris, and I ran these against all the meta marches. So if you want to know Herman's current capabilities and what he might be able to do when he's released into the game, you want to stick around till the end of the video. Now let's just quickly start off by discussing the marches that I tested with and the marches I tested against, because if we don't know what I'm testing, then it's going to be very boring. But here are all the marches I really ran. The first march I ran was a Boudica Prime with a Herman Prime, and this march was ran to find out, A, is Boudica a good commander to go with Herman, because we know that Herman's kit does favor AoE commanders, and B, is she able to still hold her own in the current meta and work with that poison debuff. The other march I ran after Boudica was a Tomyris, and this was to really find out, this is probably the most interesting march, does Herman Prime Tomyris work? Because they're both poison commanders, they're both doing the debuff, they're both basically benefiting from the poison effects. Do they work really well together, or is Tomyris just too outdated? So I ran that march as well. And the final march I ran was a Herman with a Zhuge, and this is the commander pairing which I predicted would be the strongest for many reasons. So those are the 3 main archer marches I ran. For each testing result, I ran them against 3 current meta marches. The first one, of course, Nevsky and Joan. We would expect this to be one of the main marches that archers really struggle against, and so I was interested to see, can Herman Prime hold his own against cavalry? The other 2 marches were actually infantry based, and the reason I did 2 infantry marches instead of 2 cavs and 2 infantry is I feel that infantry are definitely more dominant in the meta, especially with all the smite damage. A lot of players are wondering, can the archer commanders keep up with the smite damage, or are they too weak? So the other 2 marches I ran were a Liang with a Scipio Prime. This is probably the one I would say is the most common for free-to-play low spenders, and also the current meta march. And then the other march I tested against my Herman was a Liang with a Gorgo being the primary in this situation, because this is the best current smite march in the game, and also a very, very strong infantry pair, probably up there with one of the strongest. So those were the 2 infantry marches I ran. I could have run Sargon, but the thing is, I think Sargon is a little bit unfair in a dueling situation, because he deals a crazy amount of single target damage, but it takes like 6 turns to trigger, and in most situations, you're not going to really experience that. So I don't really like testing Sargon with the ROK tester. I prefer testing him really on the open field. That is why I didn't run him. So now that we know which commanders I used with Herman and which ones I tested against him, let's switch over to the testing simulator to see what I actually used during the test. So now here is the Rise of Kingdoms battle simulator. It was made by someone on Patreon. Their name is like Specco. Hopefully I didn't butcher that, but the Discord will be in the description if you want to check it out. And this is really simple, the battle simulator. You input the stats and you can run battle simulations, and it does like a turn-by-turn basis that tries to calculate which commanders will win in a fight. And really simply, here's everything I ran for each side. The first thing I did was give each side 15% health bonus. This is to emulate a 5% city skin, which is very common for lower spenders, and also a 10% health rune, another fairly common thing. The other thing I ran was 310,000 troops with the best civilization for each troop type. So with archers, I ran the Ottoman civilization the whole time, by far and away the best archer civilization. With cavs, I ran Byzantium, in my opinion, the better of the basically like 3 or so cav civilizations. And with infantry, I ran the France civilization, because infantry and France are very powerful, because France does give some hospital bonuses as well. So those are probably the 3 best civilizations in my opinion, and they're the 3 that I chose to run for this test. The other things I did was I gave each side a full set of their own troop equipment. So infantry had, I think it's like the Eternal Empire set, and the cavs had Hellish Wasteland, and the archers had a Dragon Breath set. Every single test was run with a Horn of Fury and also a Ring of Doom, and the same for the other side. That is to try and emulate once again a very lower spender player who is running just a full legendary set of equipment. As for talents, I didn't really focus too much on these. I often went with what I thought looked best. So for Nevsky, a full skill tree. For Boudica, when I actually ran her, she was running the full skill tree. And also I made sure each side had 40% all damage to emulate being in KVK. and VIP 13 to 16. Along with this, I gave each side a full iconic set and a defense buff of 10%. So those are the main testing parameters, and now that we've known all the commander pairings and all the testing parameters, let's just get straight into the results. So now here are the first testing results with Boudica Prime and Herman, and this is going to be like the first group we go over. It's the Boudica marches, and I ran this march, Boudica Prime Herman against Gorgo Lao Che, and you can see they won by around 6,000 T5 7 wins, which is a pretty good number to win by, especially against a Smite march. As for the second test with Boudica and Herman, they won again by around 5,000 7 wins, which is a pretty good number as well. More closer to like 4,600, but that is still a solid win right there. So Boudica Prime Herman is clearly holding its own against the Smite damage. This could probably be due to Boudica Prime being somewhat tanky and being able to take quite a few hits, and Herman having all damage reductions. And then the other test, they won by around 4,000 or so 7 wins. So Boudica Prime Herman did really good against Gorgo Lao Che. You'll notice this is not a trend for some of the other marches that did struggle against Gorgo Lao Che. The next march I ran with Boudica and Herman was against a Nevsky and Joan, and oddly enough, Boudica with Herman won by around 5,000 7 wins in this second report here, or first report, and that was a pretty good trade. So Boudica Prime with Herman did pretty good against Nevsky in that first report. Second report, they did even better, winning by 13,000 7 wins, which is just absolutely insane. I think that Herman and Boudica must have got some really lucky cycles there to do that well, but then again, it's only like a 5,000 7 win difference from the first one. So yes, that's a pretty big difference, but it's not too far as you could say it's impossible to get in a real open field situation. So Boudica Prime with Herman doing really good against that Nevsky Joan, and the third report says it again, winning by another 5,000 7 wins. So Boudica Prime with Herman really strong against that Nevsky Joan, and I'm surprised it performed that well. The final Boudica march I ran was against a Lao Che with a CPO, and honestly, the archers were just destroying Lao Che's CPO. You can see here, Boudica with Herman won by around 20,000 severely wounded units. It was not even close for the Lao Che with the CPO, so that is just insane. Next report, they won by around 17,000 units, almost 18,000, which once again is an insane trade. And the final report, they won by 23,000 units. So Boudica Prime with Herman is just absolutely destroying every single march I put it against. This is the current meta of Rise of Kingdoms, and Boudica Prime Herman is winning by a very large margin. This could be due to some errors within the testing simulator, but often I find the simulator is fairly accurate. It's not 100% accurate. It does change from time to time, but I mean, this is probably like 85 to 90% of what Herman would actually do when he's in game. Plus or minus 10% 7 wins is what I usually like to give, but damn, Boudica Prime with Herman was destroying every single march I put it against, so that was just amazing. The next set of tests I ran were Herman with Tomyris, and you can see it didn't do as well against the Gorgo Lao Che. Herman with Tomyris against Gorgo Lao Che, first of all, lost by around 4,000 7 wins. Second report, lost by around 10,000 7 wins. And the third report, lost by around 13,000 7 wins. So Herman Tomyris, right off the bat, is definitely not doing as well against Gorgo Lao Che as Boudica Prime did. So this could be definitely due to Tomyris' age, rather than anything like them not being a very good synergy. And as a debuff march, it definitely still has its potential. Plus, do keep in mind that Herman Prime's extra active skills, which probably do trigger in this situation, will give you some extra AoE ticks, but he just cannot beat that Gorgo with the Lao Che. The next marches I ran against Herman with Tomyris were Nevsky and Joan, and Nevsky Joan destroyed Herman Tomyris, winning by around 13,000 7 wins on the first report, winning by 15,000 7 wins on the second, and then winning by 23,000 7 wins on the third, and that was just an insane trade. So Herman Prime with Tomyris just is not really holding its weight for those first two marches, and Boudica Prime with Herman is definitely looking to be a lot more solid than that Herman with Tomyris, which does say I don't think they're going to be a really good pair, even if it means Herman gets extra skill cycles, because unless you're looking for a pure debuff march, they don't sustain on the open field nearly enough. Now, the final test I ran was the Herman with Tomyris, and this was against the Lao Che with the CPO, and it actually did win by a fairly large margin here, winning by around 12,000 7 wins in the first support, which is pretty good. But keep in mind, for some reason, Lao Che with CPO was really underperforming today, which is very strange, considering their double AoE usually does pretty good against just about every march. I think that Lilith was really trying to make Herman counter this Smite meta, and I don't know how, but he's doing really good against the Smite commanders in general, except this Tomyris match does struggle against the Gorgo Lao Che. The next report I ran was very similar. Herman with Tomyris won by around 16,007 wins. The first one they won by around 12,000, and the final report they won by around 16,007 wins again. So Herman with Tomyris is okay. I mean, it would work on the open field, and against some infantry marches it seems to work, but against Cavs it's just not an option. You'll get destroyed. And then against Gorgos, it does not do well. So that's something to keep in mind. And that means a Herman Tomyris, in my opinion, is probably out of the question. I wouldn't personally run it on the field unless we see some change between their interaction or something that the simulator did not pick up on until it's fully in the game. So we'll have to see when they fully release. But currently, Herman Tomyris does not look like a very strong pair. Now, the last tests I ran were Herman with Zhuge, and these are probably the ones that did overall the best, in my opinion. The first test right here was Herman Zhuge against Gorgo Lao Che, and it won by around 10,007 wins on the first report. And keep in mind, this is a double AoE march, so Herman and Zhuge in a real open field situation would be dealing like a ton of AoE just within themselves, which is insane, and also Herman is buffing Zhuge's AoE even more. Second report, they won by around 15,007 wins, which once again is absolutely insane. In the third report, they won by around 14, almost 15,007 wins again. And considering they'd have double AoE and they can beat Gorgo Lao Che so well, this is an absolutely insane, extremely powerful march. The report after that, I did one more Gorgo Lao Che. I think I just let it run one extra time because I was so shocked. And Herman Zhuge won by around 9,007 wins in that situation. So once again, absolutely dominating that Gorgo Lao Che march. Now the next reports I ran were against a Nevsky and a Joan, and right off the bat, Herman didn't do as good as the Boudica against a Nevsky and Joan, and it only won by around like 2,007 wins, but nonetheless it is beating cavalry marches, which is pretty crazy. The next report, it actually did lose to the Nevsky Joan though by around 8,007 wins. This could be due to a lucky proc with Joan's active skill going off maybe once extra than it did in the last report, or it could be due to some unluckiness with Herman and Zhuge, but that is one of the reports. And then the next one, the Herman Prime came back and actually beat the Nevsky by around 6,007 wins. So kind of a back and forth between these marches. I think there's a little bit of RNG inside the second report right here where Herman actually did lose by a fairly substantial margin. Since the first report he won by a little bit, second report he lost by a lot, and third report he won by a fairly large margin. So I think that overall Herman with Zhuge is okay against Cavs, not as good as the Boudica Prime with Herman, but still definitely capable of holding their own, especially since right now Cavs are going to probably become one of the weaker troop types once Herman fully hits the game. The next test I ran, which was the final test I ran, was the Herman Zhuge against Lao Che CPO, and needless to say, Herman just destroyed this. The first report won by 18,007 wins, which is crazy. Third report won by 21,007 wins, and the fourth report won by 23,007 wins. So overall, Herman Zhuge performed really, really well and was able to do quite well against just about every march I put them up against. So now that we've looked at all the testing results I ran with Herman, which commanders can I say fairly confidently right now would he pair really well with? And out of the three commanders I ran, to be honest, Tomyris is not an option. I don't think that she's going to be an amazing pair with Herman, and the only reason I'd bring her with Herman is if you have another pairing for your Boudica, and another pairing for your Zhuge, and another pairing for your Henry, and another pairing for your YSG, because I think all four of those commanders would be better options than Tomyris, and unless you're running like 4 to 5 Archer Marchers, at this point she's just not worth bringing into a murder ball, especially since she's not dominating with Herman Prime. She's not like, wow, she's really good. It's not even like Boudica with Artemisia, where it's like a one-off march that's really, really amazing together. Tomyris is just pretty average. Yes, she can beat some marches, but for the most part, she's losing to the real meta marches. So overall, I think Herman Tomyris is just not really within my top marches. It's probably a very good debuff march, but then keep in mind that Tomyris is going to be wiping off the poison stacks, which also makes her in some ways a kind of de-synergy with Herman, but she has other things in her kit that could be useful, like the defense reduction. But overall, I don't think Tomyris with Herman is just a way most players would go. In my opinion, I don't think she's worth it for low spenders, she's not worth it for even medium spenders, and she's not strong enough to say that even a higher spender player should maybe go out of their way to get her. You're probably better off with a Sargon, and then Herman is doing the same poison stacks which Tomyris would inflict. So only time you ever bust a Tomyris is if you're like swarming down a flag, but otherwise I don't think she's going to be one of those meta pairings with Herman. Even now with her relic, she just cannot hold her own against the current meta. Other than that though, when we look at the Boudica and we look at the Zhuge reports, I think that overall Boudica Prime has potential and is definitely still a solid option with Herman, But Zhuge is just a better march. When we look at Zhuge overall, yes, he does not do as good against cavalry units as Boudica Prime does, but Zhuge has AoE and so does Herman Prime. And if you're rocking that march and it's your only march, for example, you've got a double AoE, you've got march speed, you've got really, really good debuffs between Zhuge's AoE all damage reduction and Herman Prime's skill damage increase, which, keep in mind, Boudica would bring normally, but if you have Herman Prime, it's a little bit worse than Boudica, but it is still able to do pretty much the same as Boudica. So you're in a really good situation with running a Herman Zhuge, and out of the two commanders, I think it's the better march. In most players' situation, if you're a lower spender free-to-play who just got the Season of Conquest, and you're looking to make like one march, Herman Zhuge is a very solid pairing right now, and I think that it's probably going to be his most powerful march, because Zhuge's got really good skill damage bonuses, and he's got really, really good just overall damage in terms of AoE, like probably the most AoE damage in the game. So putting him with a commander that's boosting AoE and has AoE of their own, and is giving an AoE skill damage debuff, means that Zhuge's AoE damage is just going to pop off, because he's going to deal extra damage to the troops that have the skill damage debuff. Even if it's only 6%, it's still 6% more damage, and he's going to be dealing extra damage to the main target he's attacking, while also getting a 20% skill damage bonus. So he just synergizes really well with Herman Prime, and I think that was the little goal. They want people to really go, maybe even bench their YSG and start putting Zhuge with Herman Prime, because the synergy between those commanders is absolutely insane. Needless to say though, Boudica Prime with Herman is still a very solid option against cavalry marchers in a one-on-one situation. It does perform better, and this can be due to Boudica's active skill being really insane with its single target damage, with that massive skill damage taken increase. Also, do keep in mind, Boudica Prime has more march speed, and in a ruin situation, Boudica Prime, Henry, Nebu, all these commanders with good march speed are going to be better options in some situations than a commander like Zhuge. So overall, I'm going to say that Boudica Prime is still a solid option in some situations, but she's going to work better with commanders like YSG, who I think that is going to be good with Herman Prime, but not a commander I'd really focus on. And she's going to work better with commanders like Artemisia, so if you're still a Boudica Artemisia, I wouldn't go out of your way to get Herman Prime, only if you're looking to run an extra march with your Zhuge. Same thing could be said for Henry. If you got a good secondary to Henry, I wouldn't go out of your way to get Herman Prime and put him with Henry. Only really get Herman Prime if you're looking to get a Zhuge or replace a YSG. That's the only time I would say that march is going to be really, really powerful, because otherwise Boudica and Henry still have their own uses. They're just not the strongest pairs for Herman. Even though they could work with him, I don't think it's worth getting that very slight upgrade for a really expensive cost. So now that we've made it to the end of today's video, I would like to be discussing my first live stream of the KVK, and it's going to be my Pass 5 or Zone 5 battle pretty much going on. I'm going to be streaming the whole of Zone 5, me fighting our enemy camp over here, Fire Camp, and it's going to be a pretty big fight. And the live stream will be taking place like a day and 12 hours from now. So if you want to tune by, the link to the stream will be in the pinned comment and also in the description. Also, if you join my Discord server, you'll be notified when I go live. So guys, do consider dropping by the stream. It's a great place to ask me any questions, chill, chat, watch me fight. Maybe the first time any of you guys have seen me on the open field. So if you want to see me on the open field fighting other players head to head with my 3-march Archer Murderable, definitely come to the stream. It's much appreciated, it supports the channel, and it's very fun. Now, I just want to say thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.